Do you remember those old SpongeBob episodes, which some of them was used to watch in the 1999 season from season 1? Well, recently a secret episode has been discovered from that time period. The other day I was searching for my computer when I came across a notepad document with deep within the system 32. Having no idea how it got there, I scanned for viruses. It had one Trojan on it, so I deleted it and opened it up. It was a printed one, what seemed to be a website link, followed by the following gibberish. Having not a single clue what it meant, I continued putting the site link, which I won't tell you in case anyone out there is freaking stupid enough to try it, into my web browser. It took me to a site where it was a black background with a huge black button. It had the same text on it, which was a notepad document. I clicked on it and it brought me up a download link. The file wanted to be downloaded was called Spongecry.AVI. As crazy as I am, I went ahead and downloaded it. Big mistakes. The second download finished, which was 4.6 megabytes, and my computer made the weirdest sound ever, and turned off. I tried to reboot it, but nothing happened. The file must have destroyed my computer. As upset as I was, I realized that I was on my old PC. I hopped over to my Mac to re-download it. By the time there was no problem, what was downloaded was a single .avi file and I played it. The movie clip, which was 6 minutes and 4 seconds long, it started off like any other SpongeBob episode would, except the color was distorted, and when it got to playing the flute with his nose, it immediately went to the title screen. On the title screen was the following words, Sponge Cry, only there wasn't just any jaunty music like there usually was. It lasted about 2.5 seconds, and it didn't show who the writers and directors were. I just assumed who put it ever online edited it just for a time or something. Now, the episode started off with the inside of SpongeBob's house. It showed SpongeBob sitting in his red chair. What the strange thing was is that all of his furniture was gone, and SpongeBob was crying very hard. But it didn't sound like it came from that it does when SpongeBob normally cries. It sounded like a real human cry. But this one was different. It sounded so real and so intense. SpongeBob was absolutely bawling. He was ripping chunks out of his chair, and then the camera zoomed in really close to his face. But it's a kind of weird zoom as if the video was being taped by a real person. Then the camera zoomed out to show a rotting corpse of Gary laying on the floor in front of him. It was really disturbing. Gary was absolutely mauled to death as his eyes were laying on the floor. His shell was cracked to reveal a very gross image of the inside of Gary, which looked a whole lot like more than it would have been in reality what happened in the episode where Gary loses his shell. The camera was moving and it sounded like crazy. SpongeBob suddenly got out of his chair and ran straight forward. Then the episode stops moving for about a second. It then goes to black for 2 seconds. Then it comes back with SpongeBob's face protested and against the camera, with his mouth exploded wide and his black eyes were black, and deafening loud scream. I jolt up and turn the volume down. And then the camera starts moving again, like if it was at an earthquake. You can't even tell what was going on. It got worse than anything I've seen. The clip then goes back for black for 1 minute and 38 seconds. It then comes back inside a Krusty Krab, and it was dead silent. All of a sudden, the same face that was pressed up against the camera appeared, but this time the scream was literally deafening loud, but it only lasted for about 4 feet forward. Then, for the rest of the episode, it goes back to SpongeBob crying on the chair, but after every 10 seconds, SpongeBob gets a little bit more decayed, and the sound gets a little more distorted. By the end of all there was silent and static and screaming. Then you could see SpongeBob running again in the background of the static. But for the last 4 seconds, there was a text on the screen that read, "Open to me something. One timed action will be badly." But that's exactly that. It was written by like a 5-year-old after the clip had finished. My computer turned off by an unknown force. After seeing the video, I have never been the same. I have been more sad and uncomfortable than ever before. It was haunted by my mind at the time. I regret downloading the video in the first place, and I wish I could just go back in time and stop this from happening. And that, my little pretties, was Spongecry.AVI, a SpongeBob Lost episode creepypasta written by Sebsonic01. My final thoughts on this story? Well, I'm kind of mixed on this one, in my opinion. Like, I like it at times, but there is a few things that I really did not care about this story. I mean, it's not a terrible story from what I'm seeing here personally. I actually remember, listening to narrations of this story. Like, Hoodlum's Revenge narrated this one along with Andal, Dave the Useless, Gory Parodies, and I've actually seen a lot of narrators actually narrated this story, and, they have, different thoughts on the story. Now, this story did seem to be somewhat interesting, and it did have somewhat of a good concept to it, but there are a few things that were wrong with the story that I would like to point out. But I'm gonna go with the positives. Now, the grammar was okay. The grammar was okay for one. It wasn't perfect because I did spot a couple run-on sentences. I did spot a couple of grammatical errors here and there. I spot a few punctuation errors. But I mean, it's not a terrible story or anything. But I don't know what I should say, if it's a bad or a good story. I think it's just an okay story. I wasn't really a fan of this story when I actually heard the narration. SpongeBob starts crying, and then, it just shows him, crying for a while. I mean, like, it didn't really make possibly sense or something. But yet again, I really don't know why. But for something about this that made me, not like this story, but at the same time, I did this story. Well, I never did this story actually. Like, I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest. Like, some people have actually narrated this story, and it seemed to be a pretty interesting concept for what this one really is. Now, I mean, this story didn't seem to be, scary or anything. I actually did find this one to be somewhat enjoyable. But at the same time, though, I know it's quite a long time since I last sat there and touched the story. So, yeah, I didn't narrate this back in 2019. I did not narrate this story back then. But I actually do. I think I somewhat do remember Shadow Reader narrated this back, but it's been quite a while. So, to be honest, I definitely would have to say that this story actually had somewhat of a good concept for it. Like, I mean, the grammar was okay for what it is, and same thing with the sentence structuring. Although the paragraph structuring, there were a few times where the paragraphs were a bit big, and they did need to be spaced out, at least maybe put a few sentences in a paragraph, then break it down, go to another paragraph or something. I mean, the paragraph structuring, I think, I think the second last paragraph was kind of, big, so it does need to be, the paragraph structure was alright, but it does need to be spaced out a bit because some of the parts of this story was a little confusing to read, if I shall say. It's a bit confusing to read at times, but this story was not terrible in any way, shape, or form. It's not a terrible story. It just needs to be a little bit, just needs to be worked on. Mainly with that, but other than that, the story was not a terrible story. I actually still found this one to be enjoyable. Pretty good story for what this one is. And yeah, so I guess with that being the case and that being said, the story was good, but it does need to be a bit improvement. Like, I mean, it's not a terrible story. I still find some of this to be, enjoyable for what this is. Although it does need to be, fixed up maybe just a bit. But other than that, it just seemed to be a pretty good story for what this one is. It's still an alright one, but maybe it's not terrible. But yeah, that's just all I have to really say about this one. I mean, the grammar was okay. It does need to be revised a bit. Same with the sentence structuring. Another thing I would want to point out is the cliches that were used in the story. Like, one of them being the .avi file. Like, I mean, a lot of other pastas have done this, so I could definitely maybe give it benefit of the doubt that this is like an older pasta, so that could be why it's an older story. So I'm willing to give that one a pass. But you mean the computer shutting down afterwards for unknown reasons? Like, I mean, come on, like, that's a bit cliched in my book, because so many other pastas have actually sat there and did this. So I'm sorry to say that, but it's just the honest truth. But I definitely have to say this story does need to be revised a bit. Another cliche I did notice was, the fact that, Gary was killed for whatever reason. Like, there's no, like, mauled to death. I don't even know how Gary died or something. Like, there's no explanation for it. Like, I mean, there's somewhat of an explanation, but it didn't really explain it correctly in my book. At least to me, that is. I mean, this story was pretty interesting for what it is, and it did have a good concept, but I'm not a crazy fan of, but I never really liked this story too much. I mean, it's not terrible, I'm just not a fan of it. But anyways, this is simply my own personal opinion. If you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regarding these creepypastas. This is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. I'm giving it a 7 because it has a really good concept for the story. The grammar was okay. It does need to be fixed up a bit. Same with the sentence structuring. And the paragraph structure needs to be revised at certain parts. And I mean, the cliches that did need, maybe if they weren't removed or something, then the story would have been, okay, and or maybe at least have like a better improvement or something. But other than that, the story was not terrible. It does need to be, maybe just revised, but other than that, the story was not terrible. I still find this one to be enjoyable. So, anyways, with that being the case, that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what would you have done person to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me now with your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're new to my channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.